The Quiet Canal Lock at dusk. The light changes slowly at the end of the day along the old canal. It softens first at the edges of things, along the towpath, across the surface of the water, through the leaves of the willows that lean toward their reflections. The sky above holds its blue a little longer, but already the horizon has begun to turn, fading from pale gold to something gentler, something quieter. Dusk is arriving, not all at once, but gradually, as it always does, as it has done for as many evenings as the canal has wound its way through this countryside. The water lies still in the approach to the lock, dark and smooth as polished wood. It reflects the sky without ripple or disturbance, holding the fading light on its surface like something precious, something to be kept safe as the day draws to its close. The canal here is narrow, flanked on both sides by banks of long grass and reeds that whisper occasionally when the breeze stirs them. But mostly the reeds stand quiet, tall and patient, their feathered tops catching the last golden light. The lock itself sits waiting in its place, as it has sat for 100 years or more. It is built of old brick and weathered wood, darkened by time and water, worn smooth by the passage of countless hands and ropes and boats. The gates are heavy timber, bound with iron, their surfaces silvered with age. They stand closed now, holding back the higher water on one side, keeping the lower water calm on the other. Between them lies the chamber of the lock, empty at this moment, its walls slick with moss and watermarks that tell the story of the tides rising and falling over all the years. The lock keeper walks slowly along the towpath as the evening settles around him. His footsteps make a soft, rhythmic sound on the packed earth, a gentle percussion that disturbs nothing, that blends into the quietness rather than breaking it. He has walked this path so many times that his feet know every rise and dip, every place where tree roots have lifted the ground, every smooth stone embedded in the soil. He does not hurry. There is no need to hurry here, not at this hour, not along this stretch of water where time itself seems to move differently, more slowly, more kindly. He carries a long pole over one shoulder, and from his other hand swings an unlit lantern, its metal frame dark against the dimming sky. He wears old, comfortable clothes, canvas trousers worn soft at the knees, a wool shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, a waistcoat of faded brown. His boots are scuffed and familiar, molded to his feet by years of wearing. Everything about him speaks of routine, of tasks performed so often they have become part of the rhythm of his body, woven into the quiet of this place. He reaches the first lantern post, an iron pole set into the stone edging of the lock. The lantern there hangs waiting, its glass panels clean, its wick trimmed from the morning's care. The lock keeper sets down his pole and opens the lantern he carries, striking a match that flares briefly bright in the gathering dusk. The small flame steadies and he touches it to the wick, watching as it catches, as the light blooms soft and yellow inside the glass. He closes the lantern carefully and hooks it onto the post where it hangs now, glowing gently, casting a pool of warm light that reaches just far enough to touch the water's edge. The reflection appears immediately on the surface of the canal, a twin light, wavering slightly, golden and soft. The lock keeper pauses to look at it for a moment, as he does every evening, finding something restful in the way the light doubles itself, the way the water holds the image with such gentleness. Then he moves on to the next post, his footsteps resuming their quiet rhythm along the path. One by one, he lights the lanterns that line the lock. There are 6 of them in all, 2 on each side of the chamber, 1 at each end where the gates stand closed and waiting. Each time he strikes a match, the small sound of it seems very loud for just a moment, and then is absorbed back into the stillness. Each time a lantern catches and glows, another reflection appears on the water, and the dusk becomes a little less dark, a little more gentle. The lantern light is not bright or harsh. It does not push back the evening, but rather keeps it company, illuminating only small circles, creating islands of soft gold that float in the deepening blue of twilight. When all the lanterns are lit, the lock keeper returns to the small stone cottage that sits beside the upper gate. It is a simple building, just 2 rooms and a chimney, with a wooden door painted dark green, and 1 window that looks out over the lock. The window glows now with light from within. The lock keeper's wife has lit the lamps inside, and warm illumination spills out onto the grass before the door. But the lock keeper does not go in yet. Instead, he settles himself on the wooden bench that stands against the cottage wall, a bench worn smooth by many evenings of sitting, and he looks out over the lock, over the lantern-lit water, waiting. This is his time for waiting. The boats will come, or they will not come. The lock will be needed, or it will rest empty through the night. Either way is fine. Either way, the evening will unfold as it should, in its own time, without hurry or worry. He can see down the canal from here, can see where it curves gently through the fields to the south, can see the water catching the last light, turning silver gray and pearl, reflecting the sky that deepens now toward violet. The birds are settling. A moorhen moves slowly along the far bank, stepping carefully through the reeds, its movements deliberate and calm. Somewhere in the distance, a blackbird sings its evening song, those long, unhurried phrases that speak of day's end and satisfaction. The sound carries clearly across the water, across the still air. The lock-keeper listens, his breathing slow and even, his body at rest against the wall of the cottage. There is nowhere else he needs to be. There is nothing else he needs to do, not yet. The breeze, which has been light all day, begins to fade now as the sun drops below the horizon. The reeds, which have whispered on and off throughout the afternoon, grow quieter, their movement slowing to almost nothing. The water becomes stiller, smoother, a dark mirror that holds the sky's changing colors, lavender and rose and deepest blue, bleeding one into another. The reflections of the lanterns lie like gold coins scattered across the surface, trembling only slightly, only occasionally, when some small current shifts beneath. Time passes. How much time, it is hard to say. Time feels different here, stretched and softened, measured not by minutes but by the gradual darkening of the sky, by the way the lantern light grows more visible as the dusk deepens, by the cooling of the air against the skin. The lock-keeper sits, watching, waiting, present in this moment and in no hurry for the next moment to arrive. And then in the distance movement, a shape on the water, dark at first, difficult to distinguish from the reflections and shadows. But gradually, slowly, it resolves itself into form, a narrowboat, moving steadily along the canal toward the lock. The boat is perhaps half a mile away, in no hurry, its progress calm and even. The lock-keeper watches it approach. He does not stand yet. There is time. There is always time. The boat draws nearer, and details begin to emerge from the dusk. It is painted in the traditional colors, deep red and green and black, with fine lines of yellow and white picked out along its edges, decorative work done with care and pride. The cabin roof is dark, the bow is high, and from the stern comes the soft, steady sound of the engine, a low rhythmic pulse that carries across the water. At the tiller stands a figure, one hand resting lightly on the wooden handle, guiding the boat with small, almost imperceptible movements. The boat seems to move of its own accord, peacefully, as though it knows this route by heart. The lock-keeper rises now, slowly, his movements unhurried. He steps down from the bench and walks to the edge of the lock, to where the upper gates stand closed. The boat is perhaps 100 yards away now, moving through the pool of water above the lock, heading toward the approach. The lock-keeper raises one hand in greeting, a simple gesture, and the figure at the tiller raises a hand in return. No words are called out across the water. There is no need. This is a familiar dance, performed countless times, understood completely by both parties. The boat slows as it approaches, its engine note dropping, the sound becoming even softer, even more rhythmic. It glides the last distance on momentum, coming to rest gently against the stone edging of the lock approach. The figure at the tiller, a man wearing a dark coat and woolen cap, steps forward along the boat's narrow gunwale and lifts a rope from where it lies coiled on the roof. He steps off onto the bank with the ease of long practice and makes the rope fast to one of the iron rings set into the stone. The boat settles, held secure, its reflection wavering slightly on the water and then becoming still again. The lock-keeper walks to the machinery that operates the lower gates. It is a simple mechanism, old but well-maintained, a large wooden beam that serves as a lever, connected by iron rods and chains to the paddles that control the water flow. He grasps the beam with both hands, feeling the familiar smoothness of the wood, the exact place where his hands have worn slight depressions over years of use. He leans his weight against it, pushing slowly, steadily, and the beam begins to move. There is resistance at first, there always is, and then the mechanism yields, the chains tighten, and beneath the water, the paddle begins to rise. The sound of it is a gentle creaking, wood and metal moving together, and then comes another sound, the sound of water beginning to flow. It starts as a murmur, a soft rushing, as the water from the higher level begins to pour through the open paddle into the chamber of the lock below. The sound grows gradually fuller, richer, echoing slightly off the brick walls, but it is not loud. It is a sound like steady rain, like a stream over stones, constant and soothing. The water enters the lock chamber in a turbulent mass at first, white and churning, but it quickly spreads and slows, and begins to rise. The lock keeper watches it, as he has watched it thousands of times before. He can judge by exactly how fast it is rising, can sense in his bones when the moment will come that the level is right. There is no hurry. The water rises at its own pace, and he stands beside the mechanism, one hand still resting on the beam, waiting, patient, present. The boatman has settled himself on the roof of his boat, sitting cross-legged, his hands resting on his knees. He too watches the water, but there is no tension in his posture, no impatience. He has been through countless locks before. He knows the rhythm of it, knows that nothing can be rushed, that the water will rise when it is ready, and not before. A thermos sits beside him, and he pours something into a cup, tea perhaps, or coffee, and sips it slowly, the steam rising pale in the lantern light. The water continues to rise, inch by inch, foot by foot. The walls of the lock chamber, which were dry at the top when the chamber was empty, begin to disappear beneath the surface. The waterline climbs steadily up the dark brick, up past the moss and weed that clings there, up past the iron rings and the worn stone coping. The sound of it filling is constant, unchanging, a soft roar that surrounds the lock like a presence, like breath. The reflections of the lanterns fracture and dance on the turbulent surface, breaking into fragments of gold that swirl and recombine. Time passes. The sky continues to darken. The first stars are beginning to appear now, faint pinpricks of light in the deep blue overhead. The lock keeper glances up at them briefly, acknowledging their arrival, and then returns his attention to the water. It is nearly level now, nearly at the same height as the water in the upper pound where the boat waits. Nearly, but not quite. He waits. The water rises the last few inches. The surface calms. The turbulence slows and stills. The chamber is full. The lock keeper moves to the gates, great wooden gates that tower above him, their timber beams massive and solid. He takes hold of one of the long balance beams that extends from each gate, placing both hands on the worn wood. He pushes, gently at first, then with more of his weight, and slowly, the gate begins to swing. The hinges are old but well greased, and they move almost silently, just the faintest groan of metal on metal. The gate swings open, moving outward into the upper pound, and water that was held back now merges with the water that has risen in the chamber. There is no rush, no pouring or turbulence. The levels are the same now, and the water simply joins, becoming one continuous surface, smooth and dark. The lock keeper opens the second gate in the same way, pushing steadily on its balance beam, watching as it swings wide. The lock is open now, a passage through, and the narrowboat can enter. The boatman sets down his cup and rises to his feet, moving to the stern of his boat, his hand finding the tiller. The engine, which has been idling quietly all this time, deepens its note slightly, and the boat begins to move. It enters the lock chamber slowly, nosing forward into the space between the brick walls, gliding on the still water. The boat moves with such gentleness that it hardly seems to disturb the surface. The water ripples only slightly around its bow, in soft, spreading circles that lap gently against the walls and fade. The boat fits well. There are only inches to spare on either side, but the boatman guides it with the sureness of long experience, steering it straight and true down the center of the chamber. The lantern light plays across the boat's painted sides, illuminating the decorative work, the careful patterns, the name painted in elegant script on the bow. The boat glides deeper into the lock, and its stern passes between the upper gates. The boatman brings the boat to a halt in the center of the chamber, exactly where it should be, and steps forward to lift another rope. He tosses it to the lock keeper, who catches it easily and makes it fast to a bollard. The boat is secure now, held in place, and the boatman returns to his tiller, his hand resting lightly on it, waiting. The lock keeper moves back to the upper gates. He grasps the balance beam of the first gate and pulls, using his weight to swing it closed. The gate moves smoothly, heavily, like something that has its own momentum. It swings shut with a soft, deep sound, a solid thud of wood meeting wood, of metal latches falling into place. He closes the second gate in the same way, and now the lock is sealed at the upper end. The boat sits in the chamber, surrounded by walls, held by the water, waiting to descend. The lock keeper walks along the side of the lock to the lower gates, his footsteps soft on the towpath. He passes through the pools of lantern light and through the shadows between them, his figure appearing and disappearing in a gentle rhythm. He reaches the mechanism that controls the paddles in the lower gates, another long wooden beam, twin to the one above. He takes hold of it and begins to push, slowly, steadily, opening the paddle, releasing the water. The sound begins again, but different this time. Now it is the sound of water falling, of water flowing out and down. It pours through the paddle opening in the lower gate, tumbling into the canal below, and the level in the lock chamber begins to drop. The boat, which was floating level with the upper pound, begins to sink, slowly, steadily, settling deeper into the brick walls. The boatman stands at his tiller, watching the walls rise around him as the boat descends. He is calm, patient, trusting the process, trusting the water, trusting the old lock to do what it has done for so many years. The water falls away, inch by inch, foot by foot. The walls of the chamber rise higher and higher around the boat, revealing their full height, their weathered surfaces, the moss and weed, the iron rings, the worn stone. The lantern light from above still reaches down into the chamber, but it is more distant now, softer, casting long shadows on the walls. The boat continues to sink, and the perspective changes constantly, subtly, the view from the boat rising, the view from the towpath looking down. The sound of the falling water is constant, soothing in its steadiness. It echoes off the brick walls, creating a kind of enclosed sound, a sound that surrounds and holds, that fills the space without being harsh or loud. The lock keeper watches from above, leaning on the balance beam, his posture relaxed, his face calm in the lantern light. He knows exactly how long this will take. He can sense it in the sound of the water, in the movement of the boat, in the rhythm that has become part of him through years of tending this lock. Time passes. The sky is darker now, the stars brighter. The moon has risen, a quarter moon, its light silver and cool, adding to the lantern glow. The water in the lock chamber drops lower, lower, until finally it is level with the water in the lower pound, the stretch of canal that continues on through the fields toward the north. The surface calms. The turbulence stills. The chamber is empty to its proper level, and the boat floats now at the same height as the water beyond the lower gates. The lock keeper moves to the lower gates and takes hold of the first balance beam. He pushes, and the gate swings slowly open, outward into the lower pound. The water from the chamber and the water from the canal become one, merging without disturbance. He opens the second gate, and the lock is open now at the lower end, a passage through, and the boat can continue its journey. The boatman does not hurry. He finishes the last of his tea, pours the dregs over the side of the boat into the water, and stows his thermos away. Then he moves to the stern, takes the tiller in hand, and the engine note deepens. The rope is cast off, tossed back to the lock keeper who catches it and coils it neatly. The boat begins to move, easing forward, gliding out of the lock chamber and into the lower pound. As the boat emerges, it passes through the last of the lantern light, and the colors of its paintwork glow briefly bright before fading into shadow. The boatman raises a hand to the lock keeper, a silent thank you, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. The lock keeper raises his hand in return, standing beside the lower gate, watching the boat move away along the canal. The sound of the engine grows gradually softer, fainter, until it is barely audible, and then it is gone entirely, absorbed into the quiet of the evening. The boat becomes a shape again, a dark silhouette on the water, growing smaller as it follows the canal's gentle curve. The lock keeper watches until it disappears from sight around a bend, where willows overhang the water and the towpath winds away into darkness. Then he turns back to the lock, to the work of resetting it, preparing it for the next boat, whenever that boat might come. He closes the lower gates first, one and then the other, swinging them shut with the same steady care he used to open them. They close with soft, solid sounds, and the lock chamber is sealed again at the lower end. He walks back to the upper gates, passing again through lantern light and shadow, and there he opens the paddles, allowing water from the upper pound to flow back into the chamber. The sound begins once more, that gentle rushing, that steady pouring, and the chamber begins to fill again, rising slowly, patiently in its own time. The lock keeper does not need to watch this process closely. He knows it by heart. Instead, he walks back to his cottage, to the bench against the wall, and he sits down once more, settling into the familiar worn spot. From here he can see the entire lock, can see the lanterns glowing, can see the water rising in the chamber, can see the reflections dancing and stilling on the surface. He can hear the water pouring in, a sound that is almost like silence now. It is so constant, so much a part of this place. His wife appears at the door of the cottage, her figure backlit by the warm light from within. She says something to him, perhaps asking if he would like tea, perhaps simply checking that all is well. He nods, and she smiles and disappears back inside. The door remains slightly ajar, and light spills out onto the grass, another warm glow to add to the lanterns, another small island of illumination in the gathering night. The lock chamber continues to fill. The water rises past the moss line, past the iron rings, up toward the level of the upper pound. The sound begins to change as the chamber grows fuller, becoming softer, less echoing. The surface begins to calm as the water nears its final level, the turbulence fading, the reflections settling. And then finally the water is level, is still, and the lock is reset, is ready, is waiting once more. The lock keeper rises from the bench and goes to close the paddles, pushing the balance beam back to its resting position. The sound of water pouring ceases, and the quiet that follows is profound, deep, complete. For a moment, there is almost no sound at all, just the faint whisper of reeds in the barely there breeze, the distant call of an owl from across the fields, the soft lap of water against stone. The lock keeper stands for a moment, listening to this quiet, feeling it settle around him like a presence, like peace itself. He returns to the bench, and his wife brings him tea in a thick ceramic mug, the steam rising from it in pale wisps. She sits beside him for a moment, not speaking, just present, sharing the quietness, sharing the view of the lock with its glowing lanterns, its still water, its sense of order and calm. After a few minutes, she rises and goes back inside, back to the warm kitchen, and the lock keeper is alone again, holding his mug in both hands, feeling the heat of it, sipping slowly. Time passes. The moon climbs higher, its light growing stronger as the last of the dusk fades into true night. The stars multiply, filling the sky with their distant, steady light. The air grows cooler, and the lock keeper pulls his waistcoat a little more closely around himself, but he does not go inside. Not yet. There may be another boat. There may not. Either way, he will wait, as he always waits, as he has waited for all the years he has tended this lock. And indeed, after a time, it might be 20 minutes, it might be an hour, another boat appears in the distance, moving slowly along the upper pound, heading toward the lock. The lock keeper watches it approach, watches it resolve itself from shadow into shape, into a narrowboat painted blue and cream, with a small dog standing on the bow, alert and watchful. The process begins again, the familiar dance, the opening of gates, the rising and falling of water, the careful passage through. This boat is piloted by a woman, her gray hair tied back, her movements economical and sure. She handles her boat with quiet confidence, steering it into the lock chamber with precision, tossing her rope to the lock keeper with a nod of thanks. As the boat descends, she stands at her tiller, one hand resting on the dog's head, both of them patient, both of them still. The dog does not bark or whine. It simply waits, as calm as its owner, as calm as the water itself. The boat completes its descent and passes out through the lower gates, moving on into the night, following the same path as the boat before it. The lock keeper watches it go, watches the woman steer it around the distant bend, watches the darkness fold around it until it is gone. Then he resets the lock once more, opening the paddles, letting the water rise, listening to the familiar sounds, feeling the familiar rhythms. A third boat comes, and then a fourth. Each one is different, different colors, different names, different people at the tiller, but the process is always the same. The patient approach, the careful entry, the slow descent, the quiet departure. Each boat leaves its wake on the water, ripples that spread and fade, that merge with the reflections of the lanterns, that eventually still back into the mirror-smooth surface that holds the moon and stars. Between boats, the lock rests. The water in the chamber lies quiet, undisturbed. The lanterns burn steadily, their flames protected by the glass, casting their soft glow. The lock keeper sits on his bench, or walks slowly along the towpath, or stands by the gates with his hands resting on the balance beams, waiting, watching, present in the stillness. The night deepens. The air grows cooler still, and mist begins to form over the water, thin veils of it that drift and curl, that catch the lantern light and glow softly, that make the canal look even more dreamlike, even more removed from the everyday world. The mist moves slowly, without wind to hurry it, simply existing, simply being, adding another layer of softness to the scene. A fifth boat arrives, and then the spaces between boats grow longer. The lock keeper waits, patient as ever, and eventually a sixth boat comes, moving even more slowly than the others, as though reluctant to disturb the quiet. This boat is very old, its paintwork faded, its woodwork weathered, but it is well maintained, well loved. An elderly couple pilots it together, the man at the tiller, the woman standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder. They move through the lock in silence, smiling at the lock keeper, nodding their thanks, speaking not a word but saying everything through their gentle presence. When they have passed through and disappeared into the night, the lock keeper senses that this may be the last boat of the evening. There is something in the air, some quality of lateness, some depth of quiet that suggests that the canal is settling now, preparing to rest. He waits a while longer, giving any last boats time to arrive, but none come. The water remains undisturbed. The towpath stays empty. He rises from the bench and walks one more time around the lock, checking that everything is in order. The gates are properly closed, the paddles properly set. The ropes are coiled neatly. The lock is full, level with the upper pound, ready for the first boat of tomorrow. Everything is as it should be. Everything is in its place. He begins to extinguish the lanterns, one by one, moving from post to post. He opens each one and blows gently on the flame, and the light goes out, leaving only a thin trail of smoke that rises and disappears into the night. As each lantern is extinguished, the darkness grows deeper, but it is not a frightening darkness. It is a gentle darkness, a restful darkness, illuminated still by the moon and stars, softened by the mist, held by the quiet presence of the water. When only one lantern remains lit, the one by the cottage door, the lock keeper stands for a moment looking out over the lock, over the canal, over the fields beyond. He can see the water stretching away in both directions, silver in the moonlight, bordered by the dark shapes of reeds and willows. He can hear the faint sounds of night, an owl calling again, the rustle of some small creature in the grass, the gentle lap of water against stone. He can feel the coolness of the air, the stillness of the evening, the peace that has settled over everything. He turns toward the cottage, toward the light spilling from the open door, toward the warmth and comfort inside. But before he goes in, he takes one last look at the lock, at the dark water lying quiet in the chamber, at the gates standing closed and secure, at the towpath stretching away into shadow. Everything is well. Everything is as it should be. The lock has done its work for another day, and now it can rest. He lifts the last lantern from its post and carries it inside, closing the door softly behind him. The light from the cottage window glows for a little while longer, warm and golden against the darkness, and then it too is extinguished, and the canal is left to the night, to the moon, to the stars, to the mist that drifts slowly over the water. The lock lies quiet in the darkness, its bricks and timbers solid and still, its gates closed, its chamber full. The water within it is perfectly level, perfectly calm, a dark mirror reflecting the stars above. No ripple disturbs it, no sound breaks the silence. It simply is, simply exists, waiting patiently for tomorrow, for the sun to rise, for the first boat of a new day to arrive and need passage through. The reeds along the banks sway very slightly in the night breeze, their soft whisper like breathing, like the slow, steady breath of sleep. The willows overhang the water, their branches trailing on the surface, barely touching, creating the faintest of ripples that spread and fade, spread and fade. The fields beyond the canal lie dark and empty, resting under the stars, waiting for dawn. A duck paddles slowly across the water near the far bank, leaving a V-shaped wake that catches the moonlight. The duck reaches the reeds and settles itself among them, tucking its head under its wing, becoming still. A water vole moves along the edge of the canal, its small body low to the ground, hurrying home to its burrow. It disappears into the darkness, and the canal is still again. The moon climbs higher, past its zenith now, beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon. Its light shifts subtly, changing the shadows, changing the way the water reflects the sky. The stars will slowly overhead, ancient and constant, unchanged by anything that happens below them. Time passes, measured only by their movement, by the passage of the moon, by the deepening of the night. The lock simply waits. It has no thoughts, no concerns, no worries. It is only wood and brick and water, shaped by human hands into a tool, a passage, a way through. But in its stillness, in its patient waiting, there is something peaceful, something that speaks of purpose fulfilled, of work well done, of rest earned. The lock has served all the boats that came to it this day. It has lifted them and lowered them, has held them safe, has let them pass. And now it rests, as even useful things must rest, gathering its strength for tomorrow. The cottage beside the lock is dark now, its windows unlit, its inhabitants sleeping. The lock keeper lies in his bed, his breathing slow and even, his body relaxed after the day's work. He does not dream, or if he does, his dreams are quiet, peaceful, filled perhaps with images of water and boats and lantern light. His wife sleeps beside him, her hand resting on his arm, both of them safe and warm under the old quilt, both of them held by the silence of the night. The canal stretches away in both directions from the lock, winding through the countryside, passing under bridges, through villages, between fields and woods. All along its length, the water lies quiet, reflecting the moon, holding the night. There are other locks along the canal, other lock keepers sleeping in other cottages, but here at this lock, everything is perfectly still, perfectly at peace. A fox crosses the towpath some distance from the lock, pausing to look at the water, its eyes catching the moonlight and reflecting it back in brief gleams. The fox continues on its way, trotting silently into the darkness, intent on its own business, leaving no trace of its passing. An hour later, a badger does the same, waddling along the path with its distinctive rolling gait, snuffling at the ground, searching for food. The canal pays no attention to these visitors. It simply continues to exist, continues to reflect the sky, continues to hold the moon and stars on its surface. The mist thickens slightly as the night wears on, becoming more substantial, more present. It lies in layers over the water, drifting very slowly, moving without direction, simply being. In places it is thick enough to obscure the far bank, to soften the edges of things, to make the world seem smaller, more intimate, more enclosed. The lock appears and disappears in the mist, its solid form ghostly, dreamlike, half-seen. And still the night continues. The hours pass, one after another, marked by nothing, distinguished by nothing. There are no events, no occurrences, no changes. There is only the slow wheel of the stars, the gradual movement of the moon, the gentle drift of the mist. The lock remains as it is, unchanged and unchanging, a solid presence in the darkness, a place of safety and order and calm. Toward the deepest part of the night, when the moon has set and the stars are at their brightest, when the darkness is at its fullest, the water in the lock chamber becomes absolutely still. Not a ripple, not a wavelet, not the slightest disturbance. The surface is like glass, like polished metal, so perfectly smooth that it seems almost impossible. In this perfect stillness, the reflection of the stars is exact, complete, as though there are two skies, one above and one below, mirror images identical. This moment of perfect stillness lasts. It does not pass quickly. It simply is, existing in its own time, held by the night, protected by the darkness. If anyone were awake to see it, they might find it almost unbearably beautiful, this perfect reflection, this flawless calm. But there is no one awake. There is no one to see. The lock keeps its beauty to itself, content to exist unobserved, needing no witness. And then, so gradually that it is impossible to say exactly when it begins, the darkness begins to thin. Not the lifting that comes with dawn, that is still hours away, but a subtle shift, a barely perceptible lessening. The stars remain bright, but the sky between them seems fractionally less black, fractionally more blue. The mist grows visible as mist rather than as darkness, its whiteness apparent even in the night. The water of the canal shifts from black to deep, deep gray. The lock remains still through this transition, this slow movement toward morning. The gates stand closed. The chamber lies full. The balance beams rest in their positions. The iron rings and chains and paddles all rest in place, waiting, patient, ready. The bricks and timber of the lock hold their positions, as they have held them for decades, as they will hold them for decades more, solid and dependable and strong. A bird calls once, somewhere in the distance. Just once. A single note. And then silence again, deep and complete. But that single call is like a marker, like a sign. It says that night is passing, that morning is coming, that the world will turn again toward the light. But morning is not here yet. Night still holds. Darkness still reigns. And the lock still rests. The cottage beside the lock remains dark and quiet. Inside, the lock keeper sleeps on, his breathing steady, his face peaceful in repose. Tomorrow he will wake and begin again. Will eat his breakfast, will walk out to check the lock, will light the lanterns when evening comes, will tend to the boats that arrive needing passage through. But tomorrow has not come yet. For now there is only this moment, this deep night, this profound rest. The water in the lock chamber holds its perfect stillness. The stars continue their slow wheel overhead. The mist drifts and settles, drifts and settles. Time passes without marking its passage. The lock simply is. And in this being, in this stillness, in this perfect rest, there is everything that matters. There is peace. There is calm. There is the quiet certainty that when morning comes, when boats arrive, when the work of the day begins again, everything will be ready. Everything will be in order. Everything will unfold as it should, in its own time, without hurry or worry or fear. The lock has done its work. Now it rests. And in its rest, it teaches what rest means, not absence of purpose, but purpose fulfilled. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not an end, but a pause between. Rest that prepares for waking. Stillness that prepares for movement. Silence that prepares for sound. The night deepens toward its end. The lock waits, patient and still. The water holds the stars. The darkness holds everything. And slowly, slowly, peacefully, perfectly, the world turns toward morning. And the lock, the quiet canal lock at dusk, now at the deepest part of night, holds its vigil in the darkness, patient and strong, waiting for tomorrow, resting in tonight, perfectly still, perfectly calm, perfectly at peace. The mist over the canal thickens and thins in slow waves, moving with rhythms too subtle to perceive except over long periods of watching. It gathers more densely in the hollows where the land dips toward the water, and thins over the surface of the canal itself, drawn upward by some imperceptible current of air. The mist is cool and damp, carrying with it the scent of water and earth and growing things, the smell of reeds and mud, and the particular mineral quality of the canal itself. In the deepest part of night, the world seems smaller, more contained. The darkness presses close, not threatening but sheltering, wrapping around the lock and the cottage and the towpath like a soft blanket. Beyond the immediate area of the lock, the fields and woods and distant hills disappear into shadow, cease to exist in any visible way, leaving only this small pocket of reality. The lock, the water, the path, the cottage. Everything else is elsewhere, in some other realm, some other time. The lock chamber holds its water with perfect constancy. The level does not change. The surface does not ripple. It is as though the water has become something more solid than water, something permanent and unchanging. The brick walls of the chamber rise from the water's edge, their surfaces invisible in the darkness but present nonetheless, solid and real, doing their work of containment without thought or effort, simply by being what they are. The upper gates stand closed, their massive timbers sealed together, the iron straps and bolts holding them firm. The wood is old, very old, darkened and hardened by decades of exposure to water and weather. During the day, the grain of the wood is visible, showing the years of the tree's growth, the pattern of their living. But now, in darkness, the gates are only shapes, only presences, only the sense of something solid and dependable standing in its place. The lower gates, identical to the upper, stand equally closed, equally firm. Between these two sets of gates, the locked chamber exists as a separate space, a room of water, a place apart. When boats are present, passing through, the chamber is active, purposeful, engaged in its work. But now, empty of boats, filled only with water and darkness and stillness, the chamber simply waits, exists, persists. The balance beams that extend from each gate lie still, their long wooden arms reaching out over the towpath, perfectly balanced, perfectly poised. They are weighted precisely so that one person can move them, can use them to swing the massive gates open and closed. During the day, when hands grasp them and push or pull, they move with surprising ease, the engineering of them elegant in its simplicity. But now no hands touch them. Now they simply rest, balanced in stillness, their weight distributed perfectly over their fulcrums. The mechanism that controls the paddles, those underwater gates that regulate the flow of water into and out of the chamber, is equally still. The great wooden beams, the iron rods, the chains that connect everything, all of it rests in its neutral position, neither open nor closed but simply waiting, ready to be engaged when needed. The metal has a smell, faint but distinct, the smell of old iron and oil and water, a smell that speaks of industry and usefulness and things made to last. Somewhere in the distance, far across the fields, a church bell sounds the hour. The sound carries clearly through the still night air, each strike distinct and pure, resonating and fading before the next one comes. The bells mark 3 o'clock. The sound fades away into silence, absorbed by the darkness, and the night closes around the lock once more. 3 o'clock is the deepest part of night, the hour when sleep is heaviest, when the world seems most fully given over to darkness and dreams. In the cottage beside the lock keeper and his wife sleep deeply, their breathing synchronized, their bodies relaxed and still beneath the covers. The cottage itself seems to sleep, its timbers settling slightly, making small sounds, tiny creaks and whispers that are less sounds than the absence of sound, the gentle noise of wood and plaster at rest. The cat that lives in the cottage, which has been curled on the hearth in the kitchen, stirs briefly, stretches, and then settles again into sleep, tucking its nose under its tail. The embers in the hearth glow faintly, barely visible, holding the last warmth of the evening's fire. By morning they will be cold ash, but for now they persist, tiny points of red in the darkness, holding on to heat, holding on to light, not ready yet to surrender completely to the night. The canal itself, stretching away from the lock in both directions, lies under the darkness like a ribbon of deeper shadow, like a path through the night. The water reflects nothing now. The moon has set, and the stars, though bright, are too distant to create clear reflections. The canal is simply dark, a presence felt more than seen, known more by memory and familiarity than by sight. But it is there, constant and unchanging, following its ancient course, holding its water, connecting this place to distant other places miles and miles away. Along the canal's length, other locks wait in darkness, other chambers stand filled and ready, other gates rest closed. Some of these locks are miles away. Some are only a few hundred yards distant, around bends in the canal, past bridges, through stretches where the water narrows or widens. Each lock is unique in its details, but all are the same in their purpose, in their function, in their patient waiting. They are siblings, these locks, children of the same engineering vision, built in the same era by men who understood water and gravity and the need for passage. Between the locks, the canal runs level, maintaining its height above the surrounding land through the work of embankments and cuttings. In some places the canal runs above the fields, held up by banks of earth, and in other places it cuts through hills, with the land rising on either side. All of this engineering, all of this shaping of the landscape, was done to create a level path for boats, a highway of water that could carry goods and people from place to place without the need for horses or roads or wheels. The towpath that runs alongside the canal was worn smooth by the hooves of the horses that once pulled boats along these waters. For decades, horses walked this path every day, dozens of them, hundreds of them, pulling heavily laden boats at a steady walking pace. The horses are long gone now, replaced by engines, by diesel power, by the internal combustion that drives the modern narrowboats. But the path remains, still smooth, still well-trodden, now by the feet of walkers and the occasional bicycle, by people who come to the canal for peace, for quiet, for the particular solace that water offers. The lock-keeper, in his sleep, perhaps dreams of horses. He is old enough to remember when they were still working on the canal, old enough to have seen the last of them in his youth. He remembers their patient strength, their steady pace, their breath steaming in the cold morning air. He remembers the men who walked beside them, guiding them, the way they would call out greetings as they passed, the camaraderie of the canal folk, the sense of community among those who worked these waters. But these are dreams, if they are anything at all. Perhaps he dreams of nothing. Perhaps his sleep is simply darkness and rest, without images or stories. Perhaps he exists in those hours in some state beyond dreaming, in pure rest, pure peace, his mind and body completely still, completely at ease. The stars continue their slow movement across the sky. Constellations that were overhead earlier in the night have shifted westward, and others have risen in the east. The Great Bear circles the northern pole. Orion marches across the southern sky, his belt a perfect line of 3 bright stars. The Pleiades glimmer in their cluster, that small gathering of lights that looks almost like mist, almost like a smudge on the darkness. These stars have looked down on this canal since before it was built. They looked down on the fields that were here before the canal, on the forests that were here before the fields, on the wilderness that existed before humans ever came to this land. They will look down on whatever comes after, long after this lock and this cottage and this canal have crumbled and returned to earth. They are timeless, or as close to timeless as anything can be, and their light, traveling for years across the emptiness of space to reach this small planet, this particular canal, this quiet lock, seems to carry with it a sense of perspective, of vastness, of the insignificance and yet the perfect rightness of this small scene. The lock does not think about stars. It cannot think at all. But if it could, it might take comfort in their presence, in their constancy, in the way they mark time without being subject to time. The lock, too, marks time without being subject to it. Seasons pass, years pass, but the lock remains, does its work, continues to serve its purpose. It changes, yes, it weathers, it ages, it requires maintenance and repair, but essentially it persists, essentially it endures. A bat flickers past, so quick that even if someone were watching they might doubt they had seen it. The bat is hunting insects over the water, using sounds beyond human hearing to locate its prey. It dips and swerves, following flight paths that seem random but are actually precisely calculated, responding to the movements of moths and midges that hover over the canal. The bat catches an insect, devours it without slowing, and continues its hunt, tracing invisible patterns in the darkness. The reeds along the bank, which have been still for hours, begin to move again slightly. The night breeze, which had died away completely, is returning, just the faintest breath of air, barely enough to stir the reed tops. The movement is so slight that the sound it makes is almost below the threshold of hearing, less a sound than a sensation, a feeling in the air. But it is there, this small return of wind, this gentle reminder that the air is not still but flowing, always flowing, moving in currents and eddies too subtle to see but always present. The water in the lock chamber responds to this breeze, but so minimally that the response is almost imperceptible. The surface, which has been like glass, develops the faintest texture, the smallest possible ripples. They are not waves, nothing so substantial as that, but only the slightest roughening of the surface, as though the water has developed a fine grain, like velvet or silk. The reflection of the stars, which has been perfectly clear, wavers ever so slightly, and then steadies again as the breeze passes. Time continues its passage. Minutes accumulate into an hour. The church bell will sound again eventually, marking 4 o'clock, but that time has not yet come. For now, there is only this extended present, this long moment of darkness and stillness. Nothing changes, or if things change, they change so slowly and subtly that the change is impossible to perceive. The night simply is, and the lock exists within it, and the hours pass. In the cottage, the lock keeper stirs in his sleep, shifting position, pulling the quilt more closely around his shoulders. His wife murmurs something, words without meaning, the sound of sleep talking, and then is quiet again. Their breathing continues, steady and slow. The cat on the hearth opens one eye, sees that nothing requires its attention, and closes the eye again, returning to whatever dreams cats dream. The embers in the hearth fade a little more. The red glow becomes dimmer, smaller, a handful of coals still holding heat, but losing the battle against the night's coolness. By morning, as the first light comes, these embers will be gray ash, cold and lifeless. But for now they persist, stubborn little points of warmth, refusing yet to surrender. Outside, the mist continues its slow dance over the water. It is thicker now than it was an hour ago, denser, more substantial. It lies heavy over the canal, filling the space between the banks, reaching up perhaps 6 feet or 8 feet above the water's surface. Above this layer of mist, the air is relatively clear, and the stars shine down through it, their light diffused and softened but still visible. The mist creates a kind of ceiling, a boundary between the world of the water and the world of the sky. The lock gates, rising above the mist, seem to float in whiteness, to be untethered from the ground, suspended in nothing. Their dark forms are ghostly, dreamlike, more imagined than real. The balance beams extending from them disappear into the mist and vanish, as though they reach only partway across the towpath before ceasing to exist. It is a strange effect, this partial visibility, this sense of things being present and absent at the same time. A sound carries across the water from some distance away, a splash, sudden and brief. Perhaps a fish has jumped, breaking the surface and falling back. Perhaps a water bird has landed. The sound is singular, unrepeated, and after it comes silence again, deeper for having been broken. The ripples from whatever made the splash spread outward in perfect circles, invisible in the darkness and mist but traveling nonetheless, carrying their small disturbance across the water until they fade into stillness. The canal is alive with such small events, such tiny occurrences that happen in darkness and solitude, witnessed by no one, significant to nothing beyond themselves. Fish rise and fall. Birds settle and wake. Small mammals drink at the water's edge. Insects hatch and fly and die. The water itself moves in imperceptible currents, stirred by temperature differences, by the slow flow that continues even in this still pound, by forces too subtle to name. The canal is not merely a static thing, not merely water held in place by banks and locks. It is a living system, dynamic and active, even in the deepest night, even when it appears to be completely still. The lock chamber, as part of this system, participates in this slow life. The water within it is connected to the water in the upper pound, is the same water, though separated by the gates. Molecules of water drift and mingle. The temperature of the water in the chamber adjusts slowly to match the temperature of the surrounding air. The brick walls of the chamber radiate the heat they absorbed during the day, releasing it into the water, into the air, the warmth dispersing gradually into the coolness of the night. The moss that grows on these walls, thick in places, thin in others, holds moisture against the brick. This moss is ancient, or at least very old, having established itself decades ago and persisted, generation after generation, each year's growth layered on the previous years. The moss is dormant now, in this season not growing, simply existing, waiting for spring and warmth and the return of active life. But even dormant, it serves a purpose, providing shelter for tiny insects, for microscopic creatures, creating a microhabitat in the narrow space between moss and brick. Higher up the walls, above the waterline even when the chamber is full, other plants have found purchase. Small ferns grow in cracks between bricks, their roots working into the mortar, slowly breaking it down, slowly reclaiming the lock for nature. Lichen spreads in patterns across the stone coping, gray-green and orange, growing so slowly that its movement is measured in years. These plants are colonizers, pioneers, the leading edge of nature's patient effort to dissolve all human work back into earth and wildness. But that dissolution is slow, so slow that it might as well be not happening at all. The lock is strong, well-built, maintained with care. The lock keeper, when he is awake and working, patches the mortar when it crumbles, pulls weeds when they grow too large, keeps everything in good repair. The lock will stand for many more years, many more decades, possibly another century if it continues to be tended. And even if it were abandoned, even if no one maintained it anymore, it would take a very long time to fall into ruin. The bricks and timber and iron are solid, durable, resistant to time. The stars continue their wheel. The night continues its passage. The mist continues its drift. And the lock continues its waiting, patient and still, performing no function now except to exist, to persist, to be ready. Somewhere far down the canal, perhaps a mile away, perhaps two, another narrowboat is moving through the darkness. Its occupants are traveling through the night, perhaps trying to reach a destination before morning, perhaps simply preferring to travel in the quiet hours when the canal is empty and peaceful. The boat's engine makes a low, steady sound, muffled by distance, barely audible even in the stillness. The sound grows neither louder nor softer. The boat is traveling parallel to this lock, not toward it, moving along some other stretch of the canal, perhaps heading toward some other lock to wait for morning, and for the keeper there to help them through. The sound of that distant engine is soothing, hypnotic, a steady pulse that blends with the darkness, that becomes part of the texture of the night. It continues for a long time, and then gradually, very gradually, it fades, growing fainter and fainter until it can no longer be distinguished from the silence, until it merges completely with the quiet and is gone. The boat has moved beyond hearing, has passed out of this part of the night, continuing its journey toward wherever it is going. The silence that follows is complete. There are no engines now, no sounds of human activity, nothing but the natural sounds of the night, the occasional rustle of reeds, the soft lap of water, the distant call of an owl. These sounds are so familiar, so much a part of this place, that they are almost not sounds at all but simply aspects of the silence, textures within the quiet. An hour passes. The church bell sounds again, four low, deep tones that resonate across the fields and fade into darkness. 4 o'clock. The night is beginning its long, slow movement toward dawn, though dawn is still hours away. But some change has begun, some subtle shift. The darkness feels different, though in what way it is difficult to say. Perhaps it is slightly less absolute, less total. Perhaps there is some quality in the air that speaks of transition, of passage, of the beginning of the end of night. But these changes are so subtle that they might be imagined. To look at the lock, at the canal, at the surrounding darkness, is to see no change at all. Everything appears exactly as it has appeared for hours. The lock stands closed and full. The water lies still. The mist drifts. The stars shine. Nothing has changed, and yet everything is slowly, imperceptibly changing, moving toward morning, moving toward light, moving toward the return of day. The lock keeper, in his sleep, begins the slow drift upward toward waking, though he will not actually wake for another hour or more. His sleep becomes lighter, less deep. He dreams now, dreams of water and boats, of gates opening and closing, of his hands on the balance beams, of the familiar rhythm of his work. These dreams are pleasant, comfortable, the mind rehearsing what the body knows so well. He moves slightly in his sleep, his wife moves in response, and they settle again into stillness, into the last hours of rest before the day begins. The cat on the hearth wakes, stretches languidly, and pads silently through the dark cottage to the door. It sits there, waiting, patient as only a cat can be patient, knowing that eventually the door will open, that eventually it will be let out to prowl the dawn. But that time has not come yet, and so it waits, still and composed, its eyes reflecting the faintest light from the dying embers. The embers are nearly gone now. Only one or two still show any red, and that red is dim, fading. The rest is gray ash, cold or nearly cold, the wood that was burned now reduced to its mineral components, its energy released as heat and light, its substance transformed. By morning, the hearth will be cleaned, the ash swept away, and new wood will be laid for a new fire. But that is work for the coming day. For now, the hearth simply holds the last warmth of yesterday's fire, the last faint glow. Outside, the mist begins very slowly to thin. Not dramatically. It is still thick over the water, still dense and present, but imperceptibly, gradually, the density lessens. This is a sign, one of the first subtle signs, that dawn is approaching. The mist that forms during the night often begins to dissipate as morning nears, responding to changes in temperature, to the first stirrings of dawn breezes, to forces too subtle to name but nonetheless real. The water in the lock chamber remains perfectly still. Hours have passed since it was last disturbed, and it has settled completely, has become as still as water can become. Every particle is in its place. Every molecule has found equilibrium. The surface is flawless, unmarked, a perfect plane that reflects the sky above with absolute fidelity. If there were more light, the reflection would show every detail of the stars, every nuance of the sky. But in this darkness, there is only the sense of perfect stillness, perfect calm, perfect peace. The balance beams extending from the gates have collected dew as the night has progressed. The wood is damp now, slick with moisture, the grain darkened by it. In daylight, the dew would be visible as droplets, as a sheen on the surface. In darkness, it is only felt, only known by inference. But it is there, coating everything, the balance beams, the gates, the iron fittings, the brick coping. The whole lock is damp with night moisture, with the water that the air has released as the temperature has dropped. This dampness is part of the lock's life, part of its existence. The wood swells slightly with moisture. The iron begins its slow process of oxidation. The brick absorbs water into its porous surface. These processes have been happening every night for decades, for the entire life of the lock. They are part of what it means to be a lock, to exist in constant contact with water, to be subject to the cycles of wet and dry, of warm and cool, of day and night. The lock keeper understands these processes, though he might not describe them in scientific terms. He knows that wood needs to be kept painted or oiled, that iron needs to be greased, that bricks need to be pointed when the mortar crumbles. He knows these things not from books but from experience, from years of working with water and wood and stone, from the accumulated wisdom of all the lock keepers who came before him, passed down through demonstration and practice rather than through words. This knowledge is embodied knowledge, knowledge that lives in the hands and in the eyes, in the ability to see when something is wearing, when something needs attention, when something is about to fail. The lock keeper can look at a gate and know whether it will last another season. He can listen to the sound of water flowing through a paddle and know whether the mechanism is working smoothly or beginning to stick. He knows these things the way a farmer knows weather, the way a sailor knows wind, intimately, intuitively, with a certainty that cannot be explained but only demonstrated. And this knowledge, this deep familiarity, is what allows him to sleep peacefully while the lock stands empty and unattended. He knows it is sound. He knows it will be there in the morning, unchanged, ready for the day's work. He trusts it the way he might trust an old friend, with complete confidence, with no doubt or worry. The lock has never failed him. It has never betrayed his trust. And so he sleeps deeply and peacefully, while the night passes and the lock continues its patient waiting. Time moves forward. The minutes accumulate. The stars cross the sky. And imperceptibly, infinitesimally slowly, the darkness begins to thin. It is not yet dawn. Dawn is still perhaps an hour away, perhaps more. But the night has passed its deepest point and is moving now toward morning. The change is so subtle that it cannot be seen, cannot be measured, can only be sensed by someone who knows the night intimately, who has watched many nights pass from darkness into light. But the change is real. The night is ending. Morning is coming. The cycle continues. The lock stands ready. The water lies still. The darkness holds. And slowly, slowly, peacefully, perfectly, the world turns toward morning. The quality of the silence changes as the night ages. It becomes less dense, less complete, as though the darkness itself is beginning to thin from within. The stars, which have been so bright, so sharp against the black sky, begin to soften slightly, their light less piercing, less absolute. The change is so gradual that it would be impossible to point to any single moment and say, "There, that is when it began." But the change is happening nonetheless, as inevitable as the turning of the earth, as certain as the passage of time. The mist over the canal responds to this subtle shift. It begins to drift more purposefully, moving in slow currents that flow along the water's surface, following the line of the canal. The mist is still thick, still substantial, but it has begun to organize itself, to follow patterns, to move with the faint air currents that precede the dawn. In places it thins slightly, and in other places it gathers more densely, creating variations in texture, in opacity, in presence. Through this mist, the lock remains visible as a darker shape, a solid presence in the whiteness. The gates, the walls, the balance beams, all of them stand firm and unchanging, anchoring the scene, providing reference points in the sea of white. The lock is patient. It has waited through the entire night, and it can wait longer. It has no sense of impatience, no desire for morning to arrive more quickly. It simply exists in whatever moment it finds itself, content to be what it is, to do what it does, without complaint or concern. The upper pond of the canal, the stretch of water above the lock, lies invisible in the mist. Somewhere out there, hidden in the whiteness, the water continues, stretching away toward the south, toward the distant towns and villages, toward other locks, other bridges, other boats. But from the lock, from this particular vantage point, none of that is visible. There is only the immediate area, the lock itself, the cottage, the towpath, the near banks. Everything else has been erased by mist, has ceased to exist in any visible way, leaving only this small island of reality in an ocean of white. This sense of enclosure, of isolation, is not threatening. Rather, it is comforting, protective, like being held in a small, safe space while the larger world exists somewhere beyond, remote and undemanding. The lock exists in its bubble of mist, separate from everything else, responsible only for itself, required only to be present, to persist, to wait. There is something deeply peaceful about this isolation, this temporary separation from the wider world. The lower pond, the stretch of canal below the lock, is equally invisible, equally wrapped in mist. The boats that passed through during the evening have long since moved on, have traveled far down the canal, are now moored somewhere miles away, their occupants sleeping in their narrow bunks, rocked gently by the water, held safe by the stillness of the night. Those boats are part of a different story now, a different scene. Here at this lock there are no boats, no movement, no activity. There is only waiting, only rest, only the deep quiet of the hours before dawn. A bird begins to sing, somewhere in the darkness beyond the mist. It is a single bird, perhaps a robin, perhaps a blackbird, singing its first tentative notes of the morning. The song is quiet, exploratory, testing the darkness, asking whether it is time yet to wake. The bird sings for a moment, its voice clear and pure in the stillness, and then stops, as though waiting for an answer. No answer comes. The silence resettles. The bird does not sing again, not yet. It is too early still. The bird has woken momentarily, has checked the state of the night, and has decided to wait a little longer before truly beginning its day. This single brief song, however, is a marker, a sign. It indicates that dawn is approaching, that the natural world is beginning to stir, that the long night is moving toward its conclusion. The lock, which cannot hear the birds sing, which cannot know what it means, nevertheless participates in this movement toward morning. Everything participates. Everything is part of the same great cycle of darkness and light, of sleep and waking, of night and day. The lock-keeper, in his sleep, dreams of birds. He sees them in his dream, blackbirds and robins, wrens and thrushes, all the birds that live along the canal. He sees them perched on the balance beams, on the gate posts, on the cottage roof. They are singing, all of them singing together, their voices blending into a chorus that is beautiful and complex and deeply satisfying. In his dream, he listens to this chorus, and he is happy, content, at peace. The dream will fade when he wakes, will be forgotten within minutes, but while he dreams it, it is real to him, as real as anything. His wife, sleeping beside him, also dreams, though her dreams are different. She dreams of gardens, of flowers growing beside the cottage, of vegetables in neat rows, of fruit trees heavy with apples and pears. She has always loved growing things, has always found peace in working with soil and seeds and plants. In her dream, she is working in the garden, her hands in the earth, the sun warm on her back, and everything is growing abundantly, thriving under her care. Her dream, like her husband's, will fade upon waking, but for now it gives her joy, gives her rest, allows her mind to play with pleasant images while her body recovers from the day's work. The cat, still sitting by the door, waits with infinite patience. Cats are masters of waiting, of being still, of existing in the present moment without impatience or anxiety. The cat knows that the door will open eventually. It has opened every morning of the cat's life, and there is no reason to think it will not open this morning as well. And so the cat waits, its eyes half closed, its body relaxed, completely at ease with the waiting, completely content to sit in the darkness until the time comes to go outside. The embers in the hearth are dead now, or as good as dead. One last coal shows the faintest hint of red at its core, but it is fading even as the night fades, losing its heat, its light, its life. Soon it will be indistinguishable from the rest of the ash, just another gray lump among gray lumps, cold and lifeless. But it has served its purpose. It has provided warmth and light when warmth and light were needed. Now it can rest, can return to the earth from which it came, can complete its cycle. Outside, in the world beyond the cottage, beyond the lock, the countryside lies sleeping under the mist. The fields stretch away in all directions, invisible in the darkness and the white, but present nonetheless, holding their soil, their grass, their sleeping seeds. In the woods beyond the fields, trees stand with their branches bare, their leaves long since fallen, their sap withdrawn into their roots for the winter. The trees are not dead but dormant, waiting for spring, for warmth, for the signal to begin growing again. All of this, the fields, the woods, the canal, the lock, exists within a larger landscape, a countryside that has been shaped by human hands over centuries. The canal itself is one of these shapings, a human intervention in the natural world, a way of directing water, of creating passage where passage did not exist before. But the canal has been here long enough now that it has become part of the landscape, has been accepted by nature, has been colonized by plants and animals that have learned to live with it, to use it, to make it their own. The reeds that grow along the banks were not planted by human hands. They came of their own accord, seeds blown by wind or carried by birds, finding the water's edge a suitable place to grow. The fish in the canal, pike and perch, roach and bream, were stocked originally, placed there deliberately, but they have long since established their own populations, breeding and living and dying according to their own patterns, independent of human intervention. The birds that nest along the canal, the moorhens and coots, the ducks and swans, the kingfishers that flash blue along the water, all of them have chosen this place, have found it suitable, have made it part of their territory. The canal provides them with food, with shelter, with nesting sites. They give back to the canal their presence, their beauty, their songs, their role in the ecosystem. And the lock, as part of the canal, is also part of this ecosystem. The moss on its walls, the ferns in its cracks, the insects that shelter in its crevices, all of these are part of the community that has established itself around this human-made structure. The lock is not separate from nature, but part of nature, integrated into the web of life that exists along the canal. The lock keeper understands this, though again he might not express it in these terms. He knows the birds, knows their songs, knows when they nest and when they migrate. He knows the fish, knows where they lie in the canal, knows the best spots to drop a line if he wants to catch one for dinner. He knows the plants, knows which are useful and which are merely weeds, knows when to cut them back and when to leave them alone. This knowledge makes him not just a keeper of the lock, but a keeper of the canal itself, a steward of this small stretch of waterway, responsible for maintaining not just the machinery and the structure, but the health and balance of the entire system. This responsibility is one he takes seriously, though lightly. It is not a burden to him, but a privilege, a calling, a way of life that gives him purpose and satisfaction. He would not choose to be anywhere else, to do anything else. This lock, this canal, this life, these are enough for him. These are everything. The mist continues its slow transformation. The densest parts are beginning to break up slightly, to develop gaps and openings where the air between the layers becomes visible. These gaps are small at first, just brief clearings where the mist thins enough to see through, but they grow slightly larger as time passes. Through these gaps, glimpses of the water become visible, dark, still, reflecting nothing yet but holding the potential for reflection once the light comes. The stars are definitely dimmer now. The change is no longer subtle but noticeable, measurable. The brightest stars remain visible, but the fainter ones have begun to fade, washed out by the very first hint of dawn that is approaching from the east. The sky itself, which has been uniformly black all night, is beginning to show the faintest tinge of color at the eastern horizon, a hint of gray that is almost blue, almost green, but not quite either, a color that exists only at this transitional moment between night and day. This color, this pre-dawn glow, is so faint that it is more felt than seen. It is a lightening, a thinning of the darkness rather than the presence of actual light. But it is there, growing incrementally, spreading slowly upward from the horizon, pushing the darkness back, reclaiming the sky for day. This process will take time, another hour at least before the sun itself appears, but it has begun, is unstoppable now, as inevitable as breathing, as certain as the tide. The lock, unaware of these cosmic transitions, continues its vigil. The gates remain closed. The water remains still. The chamber remains full. Everything is as it has been all night, unchanged, constant, reliable. But the lock is not separate from the world, not isolated from these changes. It exists within time, within the flow of hours, within the cycle of night and day. And as the world around it begins to stir, begins to wake, begins to move toward morning, the lock participates in this movement, this transition, this slow emergence from darkness into light. A second bird begins to sing, and then a third. The dawn chorus is beginning, tentatively at first, with just a few voices, but it will grow, will swell, will become a full symphony of bird song as the light increases. For now, though, it is just these few pioneers, these early risers, testing their voices, marking their territories, announcing their survival of another night. The sound of their singing carries clearly across the mist, across the water, reaching the cottage where the lock keeper sleeps. The sound does not wake him. Not yet, but it begins the process of waking, begins to call him back from the depths of sleep toward consciousness. His sleep becomes lighter still. His dreams fade. His mind begins to orient itself toward waking, toward the day, toward the work that will need to be done. In another 10 minutes, or 15, or 20, he will wake. He will open his eyes in the darkness of the bedroom, will lie still for a moment, listening, assessing the morning, judging the weather by the sounds he hears or doesn't hear. Then he will rise, quietly so as not to wake his wife, will dress in the darkness, will make his way to the kitchen to start the fire and put on the kettle for tea. This is his routine, unchanged for years, as much a part of him as the lock is a part of the canal. But that time has not quite come yet. For now, he still sleeps, still rests, still gathers his strength for the day ahead. And the lock, like him, still waits in the last moments of night, in the final period of rest before the work begins again. The mist is noticeably thinner now. The transformation that began so subtly an hour ago has progressed to the point where it is unmistakable. The mist is still present, still substantial, but it no longer completely obscures the world. The far bank of the canal is becoming visible through the white, a dark line at first, then more detailed, showing the shapes of reeds, the outline of the towpath on that side. The mist now lies more in layers, in sheets, rather than as a uniform blanket, and these layers are separating, creating depth, creating perspective. The water of the canal, visible now through the thinning mist, shows the first hint of color. It is no longer pure black, but has begun to lighten to gray, a deep gray still, but gray nonetheless. The surface remains perfectly still, undisturbed by any wind, unmarked by any ripple. It lies like mercury, like polished metal, reflecting the sky above, which is itself beginning to lighten, beginning to show the approach of day. The lock chamber, its water connected to the water of the upper pond, participates in this lightening. The water within the chamber is also turning from black to gray, also beginning to show the sky's reflection, also preparing to receive the light when the light comes. The brick walls of the chamber, invisible in the darkness all night, are beginning to emerge from shadow, beginning to show their texture, their color, their substance. They are still dark, still shadowed, but they are becoming visible, are beginning to exist again as seen things rather than merely as presences felt or remembered. The balance beams, the gates, the mechanisms, all of these are also emerging from darkness, are beginning to be distinguishable from the air around them. Their edges are becoming defined. Their forms are becoming clear. The lock is taking on shape again, is becoming visible, is preparing to be seen and used and worked once more. The church bell sounds again in the distance, 5 deep, resonant tones that mark 5 o'clock. The sound carries across the fields, across the mist, reaching the lock and the cottage and continuing onward, spreading outward in all directions before fading into silence. 5 o'clock! The night has only an hour or so remaining before dawn arrives. The transition is nearly complete. The world is preparing to wake. In the cottage, the lock keeper stirs. His eyes open. For a moment he lies still, listening to the birds, to the silence beneath their singing, to the quality of the air, to the sense of the morning. Then he rises, swinging his legs out of the bed, his feet finding the cold floor. He sits for a moment on the edge of the bed, fully awake now, present in the moment, ready for the day. Then he stands, dresses quickly in clothes he laid out the night before, and moves quietly through the dark cottage toward the kitchen. He strikes another match and touches it to the kindling. The fire catches almost immediately, the dry wood crackling, the flames licking upward, spreading from piece to piece. He watches for a moment to make sure it is burning well, then adds more wood, larger pieces, building the fire up to a size that will last, that will provide heat and cooking capability for the morning. The fire grows, its light dancing on the walls, its warmth beginning to spread through the kitchen, pushing back the night's chill. He fills the kettle from the bucket of water on the counter and sets it on a hook over the fire to heat. Tea will be ready soon. He can wait for it, standing by the fire, warming his hands, looking out the window toward the lock. Outside, the mist is visible now in the growing light, a sea of white that covers the canal and the fields. He can see the shapes of the gates, the line of the towpath, the near bank. The far distance is still obscured, still wrapped in white, but the immediate area around the lock is becoming clear. He watches the mist, the way it moves, the way it thins and thickens. He has watched this same sight thousands of mornings, and it never loses its interest, its beauty, its sense of rightness. The mist is part of the canal, part of the morning, part of the rhythm of this place. He would miss it if it weren't there. The kettle begins to hiss, and then to whistle softly as the water comes to a boil. He takes it from the fire and makes his tea, strong and dark, adding a splash of milk from the jug. He carries the mug to the window and stands there, sipping, warming his hands on the ceramic, looking out at the lock, at the canal, at the morning that is coming. The cat appears at his feet, winding around his ankles, purring, asking to be let out. He opens the door and the cat slips through, disappearing immediately into the mist, heading off on whatever business cats have in the early morning. The lock keeper closes the door against the chill and returns to the window, to his tea, to his watching. The birds are singing more fully now. The chorus has grown, more voices joining in, the sound becoming richer, more complex. He can distinguish individual species by their songs. The robins warble, the blackbird's flute-like phrases, the wren's loud trill. He knows these birds, has listened to them every morning for years, takes comfort in their presence, in their constancy, in their reliable return each day. The light is growing steadily now. The eastern sky, which showed only the faintest hint of color before, is now definitely lighter, showing a band of pale blue-green just above the horizon. This band is spreading upward, claiming more of the sky, pushing the night westward and upward, toward the horizon on the opposite side. The stars are almost gone now, faded into the lightening sky, with only the brightest few still visible. Within minutes they too will disappear, will yield to the day, will wait for night to come again before showing themselves once more. The lock keeper finishes his tea, and sets the mug aside. It is time to go outside, to check the lock, to make sure everything is ready for the day. He puts on his coat, his boots, and steps out into the morning. The air is cold and damp, heavy with the mist. He can feel the moisture on his face, can taste it in his breath. The mist wraps around him, surrounds him, makes the world feel smaller, more intimate. He walks to the edge of the lock and looks down into the chamber. The water is still, perfectly level, ready. The gates are secure, properly closed. Everything is as it should be. He walks the length of the lock, checking each element, the paddles, the balance beams, the chains and rods and mechanisms. Everything is in order. Everything is ready. The lock is prepared for whatever boats might come, whenever they might arrive. His work for now is simply to wait, to be present, to be ready to serve. He returns to the cottage and settles on the bench against the wall, the same bench where he sat last evening. The mist is thinning more rapidly now as the light increases. The sun has not yet risen, is still below the horizon, but the sky is bright with its approaching light. The band of color in the east has spread and intensified, showing now layers of pink and gold beneath the blue, the colors of dawn, the colors that announce the sun's imminent arrival. The lock keeper watches this display, as he has watched it countless mornings before. He never tires of it, never finds it repetitive or dull. Each dawn is different, unique in its colors, its timing, its quality. Each dawn is a gift, a renewal, a promise that the world continues, that life goes on, that today will unfold as it should. The canal is becoming fully visible now as the mist lifts. He can see down its length in both directions, can see the curves it follows through the landscape, can see the bridges in the distance, can see the shapes of trees along the banks. The water is still, reflecting the brightening sky, turning from gray to silver to something approaching gold as the dawn light strengthens. And then at last the sun appears. Just the very top edge of it, rising above the eastern horizon, a sliver of brilliant gold that pierces through the mist, that sends long rays of light across the fields, across the canal, touching everything with color and warmth. The light reaches the lock, illuminates the gates, sets the windows of the cottage glowing. The world transforms in this light, changes from shadow to substance, from potential to actual, from sleep to waking. The lock keeper rises to meet the day. Another morning has come. The lock is ready. He is ready. And whatever boats need passage today will find everything prepared, everything in order, everything as it should be. The Quiet Canal Lock, which has rested through the night in darkness and stillness, awakens now to purpose, to function, to service. But for this moment, in this first golden light of morning, with the mist still thinning and the birds singing and the water still perfectly calm, there is only peace. Only quiet. Only the deep satisfaction of a night well spent in rest, and a day beginning as it should, with light, with warmth, with the promise of good work to be done. The lock waits, patient as always. The water lies still, reflecting the morning. And the world, so recently wrapped in darkness, opens now to the light. All is well. All is as it should be. The Quiet Canal Lock at dawn. The sun continues its slow climb above the horizon, revealing more of itself with each passing moment. The sliver of gold becomes a crescent, then a half circle, the light intensifying, spreading wider across the landscape. The rays that reach the lock grow stronger, brighter, transforming everything they touch. The brick walls of the lock chamber, which have been dark gray in the pre-dawn light, now show their true color, a deep red-brown, weathered and warm. The timber of the gates, silvered with age, catches the light and glows softly, the grain of the wood becoming visible, showing the years of growth, the pattern of the tree's life before it became part of this structure. The water in the chamber, which has been reflecting only the gray sky, now begins to show color. The surface catches the gold of the sunrise, holds it, transforms it into ripples of light that dance gently even though the water itself remains still. It is the light that moves, not the water, the angle of the sun changing moment by moment, creating the illusion of motion, of life, of energy flowing across the surface. The mist, which has been retreating steadily as the light increased, now begins to dissolve more rapidly. The warmth of the sun, even the gentle warmth of early morning, is enough to accelerate the process. The white layers break apart, become wispy, become transparent, and then simply cease to be, evaporating into the air, returning to invisibility. Within 10 minutes, 15 at most, the mist will be gone completely, and the canal will lie revealed in the clear morning light, open to the sky, visible from bank to bank. The lock keeper watches this transformation with quiet appreciation. He has seen it countless times, but familiarity does not breed contempt or boredom. Instead, it deepens his appreciation, gives him context for understanding the subtle variations that make each morning unique. This morning, the mist is lifting more quickly than usual. The air must be particularly dry, the sun particularly warm for this time of year. Or perhaps there is a breeze coming, still too faint to feel but strong enough to help disperse the mist. He reads these signs automatically, unconsciously, the way someone might read words on a page, extracting meaning without effort. A movement catches his eye, the first boat of the morning, approaching from the south along the upper pound. It is still some distance away, perhaps a quarter mile, but moving steadily, its engine sound just beginning to become audible, a low, rhythmic pulse that carries across the water. The lock keeper watches it approach, his mind already beginning the familiar calculations. How long until it arrives, whether the lock is ready, what the water level is, whether any adjustments need to be made. But there is time. There is always time. The boat is moving at the unhurried pace that is natural to canal travel, perhaps 3 miles per hour, perhaps 4 at most. It will be several minutes before it arrives at the lock approach. The lock keeper remains on his bench, finishing the last of his tea, which has grown cool but is still pleasant to drink. He is in no hurry. Hurry has no place here, serves no purpose, accomplishes nothing useful. Everything happens in its own time, at its own pace, and trying to rush only creates problems, creates stress, creates the possibility of mistakes. His wife appears at the cottage door, also dressed now, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. She brings him a fresh mug of tea, steaming hot, and a piece of bread spread thick with butter and jam. He thanks her with a smile, and she returns it, then goes back inside to continue her own morning work, preparing breakfast, tidying the cottage, beginning the 100 small tasks that make up her day. They have been married for 30 years, have lived in this cottage for all of that time, have developed a rhythm of life together that is as smooth and natural as the flow of water through the lock. The lock keeper eats his bread slowly, savoring it, watching the boat approach. The bread is good. His wife bakes it herself, has baked bread in the cottage's small oven for all the years they have lived here. The butter is from a local farm, delivered weekly, rich and yellow. The jam is last summer's strawberries, put up in jars, sweet and thick with fruit. Simple food, but satisfying, nourishing, part of the rhythm of their life. The boat is closer now, close enough that he can see details. It is painted dark blue with red trim, traditional narrowboat colors, maintained with obvious care. The brass fittings along the cabin shine in the morning light, polished to a high gleam. At the tiller stands a young man, perhaps in his 30s, wearing a thick sweater and a wool cap. He steers with one hand, the other holding a mug of something, coffee or tea. He sees the lock keeper and raises his free hand in greeting, a simple gesture of acknowledgement and respect. The lock keeper sets down his own mug and his bread, brushes the crumbs from his hands, and rises from the bench. It is time to work. He walks to the edge of the lock and waits as the boat approaches, slowing now, its engine note dropping, coasting the last distance on momentum. The young man handles his boat well, bringing it alongside the stone edging with barely a bump, stepping off smoothly to make his rope fast to one of the iron rings. "Morning," the young man says, his voice quiet, respectful of the early hour and the stillness of the morning. "Morning," the lock keeper replies. "Going far today?" "Down to Stoke Bruern," the young man says. "Should make it by evening if the day goes well." The lock keeper nods. Stoke Bruern is perhaps 20 miles down the canal, through 5 or 6 locks. A good day's travel at canal pace. "Weather should hold," he says, looking at the sky, at the clouds that are beginning to appear in the west, high and white and moving slowly. "Might rain tomorrow, but today should be fine." The young man nods, trusting this assessment. Lock keepers know weather, know how to read the signs, know what the sky and the wind and the feel of the air are saying. Their livelihood has depended on this knowledge, and even though that is less true now than it once was, the knowledge persists, passed down, maintained, still valuable. The lock keeper moves to the machinery that controls the paddles in the lower gates. The lock is full, level with the upper pound, so the process is simple. Lower the water by releasing it through the paddles, let the boat descend, open the lower gates, and the boat can continue on its way. He has done this so many times that his body knows the movements without his mind needing to direct them. His hands find the beam, his weight shifts, and the mechanism begins to move. The sound of water begins, that familiar rushing, that steady pouring as the lock chamber begins to empty. The young man has returned to his boat and settled himself on the cabin roof, content to wait, to watch, to let the process unfold at its own pace. He knows, as everyone who travels the canals knows, that there is no point in hurrying, no benefit to impatience. The lock will do its work in its own time, and he will descend, and then he will continue, and all of it will happen as it should, as it has happened for generations of canal travelers before him. The water in the chamber begins to drop, the level falling steadily, smoothly, the boat settling deeper between the brick walls. The morning light slants down into the chamber, illuminating the water, the walls, the boat. Everything is clear and visible in this light, sharply defined, present. The moss on the walls shows vivid green where the light touches it. The waterline on the bricks, marking the high point when the chamber is full, shows dark against the lighter brick above. The lock keeper watches the descent, his attention focused but relaxed. He knows exactly how this should look, how it should sound, how long it should take. If anything were wrong, if a paddle were stuck, if a gate were leaking, if any part of the mechanism were failing, he would know immediately, would sense it in the rhythm of the water, the sound of the flow, the feel of the morning. But everything is working as it should. The lock is sound. The mechanisms are true. All is well. A pair of ducks fly overhead, their wings making a distinctive whistling sound. They circle once, as if considering landing on the canal, then continue on their way, heading towards some other destination. The lock keeper watches them go, a brief distraction from his work, a moment of connection with the wider world of the canal, the fields, the morning. The water level is approaching the bottom now, nearly level with the lower pound. The boat floats calmly in the chamber, the young man still sitting on the roof, patient and still. The sound of the falling water begins to change as the level drops, becoming softer, less full, less echoing. And then the surface in the chamber matches the surface in the lower pound, and the sound changes again, becomes gentler, becomes almost nothing, just the final trickle of water finding its level. The lock keeper closes the paddle, pushing the beam back to its resting position. The sound of water stops. The chamber is empty, empty of all the water that was above the level of the lower pound. What remains is perfectly level with the canal beyond the gates, perfectly still, perfectly ready. The lock keeper moves to the lower gates and takes hold of the first balance beam. He pushes, the gate begins to swing, and the passage opens. The young man stands, moves to his tiller, and the engine note deepens. The boat begins to move, gliding forward out of the chamber, out of the lock, into the lower pound. It emerges into the full morning light, the sun now well above the horizon, casting long shadows across the water. The boat passes through the opened gates and continues forward, the young man steering it toward the center of the canal, toward the clear water ahead. "Thank you," he calls back to the lockkeeper, raising his hand again. "Safe travels," the lockkeeper replies, his own hand raised in farewell. The boat moves away, following the curve of the canal, gradually growing smaller, the sound of its engine fading. The lockkeeper watches it for a moment, then turns back to his work. The lock must be reset, must be raised again to the level of the upper pound, must be made ready for the next boat, whenever that boat might come. He closes the lower gates, one and then the other, sealing the chamber at the lower end. Then he walks to the upper gates and opens the paddles there, allowing water to flow in from the upper pound. The sound begins again, that gentle rushing, and the chamber begins to fill. He does not need to watch this process. His body knows its duration, knows its rhythm. Instead, he walks back to the cottage, to the bench, and sits down again to finish his breakfast. His wife has brought out more tea, has left it on the bench for him in a fresh mug. The bread is there too, covered with a cloth to keep it warm. He uncovers it and takes another piece, eating slowly, watching the canal, watching the morning unfold. Other boats will come. Some will need to descend through the lock, some will need to ascend. Each one will be helped through with the same care, the same attention, the same quiet competence that he has brought to this work for all his years here. The sun climbs higher, its light strengthening, warming the air. The chill of the night is fading, replaced by the gentle warmth of morning. The dew that covered everything, the grass, the balance beams, the cottage roof, begins to dry, evaporating into the air, disappearing as the mist disappeared, leaving everything dry and warm and ready for the day. Birds move along the canal banks, searching for food. A heron stands in the shallows some distance away, perfectly still, waiting for a fish to swim within range. The lock keeper can see it from where he sits, can see the long neck, the sharp beak, the patience that allows the bird to stand motionless for minutes at a time, waiting, watching, ready to strike when the moment comes. He appreciates this patience, recognizes in it something of his own approach to his work, to his life. Patience is a virtue here on the canal, perhaps the greatest virtue. Everything requires patience, the boats, the water, the locks, the weather. Nothing can be rushed. Everything must be allowed to happen in its own time. The water in the lock chamber continues to rise. The sound is constant, unchanging, a backdrop to the morning, a familiar presence. The lock keeper listens to it without really hearing it, the way one might listen to the sound of one's own breathing. Present, necessary, but not requiring conscious attention. He knows the sound will continue for several more minutes, and then it will stop, and the lock will be full again, and ready again, and waiting again. A second boat appears in the distance, approaching from the north along the lower pound. This boat will need to ascend, will need to be lifted up to the level of the upper pound. The lock is nearly ready. The chamber is almost full, almost level with the upper water. Perfect timing. The lock keeper watches the boat approach, judging its speed, its distance, calculating without thinking, knowing without counting that the lock will be ready when the boat arrives. The sound of water pouring into the chamber begins to change, indicating that the level is rising close to full. The lock keeper stands and walks to the mechanism, ready to close the paddles when the moment comes. He watches the water, sees it approach the final level, sees the surface begin to calm as it reaches equilibrium with the upper pound. Now, he pushes the beam, the paddles close, the sound of water stops. The chamber is full. The lock is ready. He opens the upper gates, swinging them wide, creating the passage through. The boat approaching from the lower pound is closer now, perhaps 50 yards away, its engines sound clear in the morning air. It is an older boat, painted green and yellow, showing the wear of years but well-maintained, clearly loved. An elderly couple pilots it together, the woman at the tiller, the man standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder. They have the look of people who have been together for many years, who move in harmony, who understand each other without words. The boat enters the lock approach and slows, the woman steering it expertly into position. The man steps forward and tosses the rope to the lockkeeper, who catches it and makes it fast. The boat settles into place, and the lockkeeper moves to close the upper gates, sealing the chamber, preparing to raise the boat to the higher level. The process begins again, the opening of paddles, the flow of water, the slow rise of the boat between the brick walls. The couple sits together on their cabin roof, not speaking, just present with each other, with the morning, with the moment. They have traveled this canal many times before, have passed through this lock many times before. It is familiar to them, comfortable, part of a rhythm they know and love. The lockkeeper watches them as he works, sees the way they sit close together, the way the man's arm rests across the woman's shoulders, the way she leans slightly into him. There is something deeply peaceful about their presence, something that speaks of contentment, of a life well lived, of years spent together doing what they love. He thinks of his own wife inside the cottage and feels a similar contentment, a similar gratitude for the life they have built together here at this lock. The boat rises steadily, smoothly, lifted by the water that is pouring in beneath it. The chamber fills, the level climbs, and the boat ascends from the lower pound to the upper, from one level to another, held safe by the walls, by the water, by the ancient mechanism of the lock. This is what locks do, what they have always done. They conquer gravity, they make passage possible, they connect what would otherwise be separated. They are simple machines, really, requiring no power beyond water and gravity, yet they accomplish something remarkable, something essential. The water reaches the level of the upper pound. The surface calms. The boat floats now at the same height as the water beyond the upper gates, ready to continue its journey. The lockkeeper opens the gates, swinging them wide, and the boat begins to move, the woman steering it carefully out of the chamber, the man coiling the rope as they go. "Lovely morning," the woman calls to the lockkeeper as they pass. "It is indeed," he replies, smiling. "We'll be back this way in a week or so," the man adds. "Coming round again." "I'll be here," the lockkeeper says, and they all share a brief laugh at this, at the certainty of it, at the constancy of the lock and its keeper, always here, always ready, always reliable. The boat moves away along the upper pound, heading south, heading toward wherever their journey takes them. The lockkeeper watches them go, then turns once more to reset the lock, to prepare it for the next passage. This is the rhythm of his days, boats arriving, boats passing through, boats departing. Each one is different, each one brings its own story, its own people, its own moment. But the process is always the same, the work is always the same, and there is deep satisfaction in this repetition, this constancy, this reliable unfolding of task after task, moment after moment, day after day. The morning continues to brighten. The sun is well up now, perhaps an hour above the horizon, its light strong and clear. The last traces of mist have vanished completely, and the air is dry and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and water and earth. The canal stretches away in both directions, a ribbon of water reflecting the blue sky, bordered by green banks and the darker green of trees beyond. It is beautiful, this morning, this place, this life. The lockkeeper feels this beauty not as something separate from himself, but as something he is part of, something he participates in through his work, through his presence, through his care. Another boat approaches from the south. And then another. The canal is waking up, the boats that were moored for the night are beginning to move, to continue their journeys, to travel toward their various destinations. The lockkeeper prepares to receive them, to help them through, to do his work. Each boat will be treated with the same care, the same attention, the same quiet competence. It does not matter if the boat is new or old, if the people aboard are young or elderly, if they are experienced canal travelers or newcomers. Each one deserves and receives the same quality of service, the same respect, the same help. This is what it means to be a lockkeeper, to be present, to be ready, to be reliable. To know that boats depend on you, that journeys depend on you, that the functioning of the entire canal system depends on you and others like you at every lock along the way. It is a responsibility, but it does not feel heavy. It feels right. It feels like purpose. It feels like belonging to something larger than oneself, something that has existed for generations and will continue to exist for generations to come. The lock keeper stands at his post, ready for the day's work. The sun shines down. The water flows. The boats arrive and are helped through and continue on their way. And the Quiet Canal Lock, which rested through the long night in darkness and stillness, now fulfills its purpose in the light of day, serving, connecting, enabling passage, doing its work as it has done for over 100 years, as it will continue to do for many years to come. All is well. All is as it should be. The work continues. The day unfolds. And at the heart of it all, at the center of this small world, the lock stands ready, patient, reliable, constant, doing what locks do, being what locks are, serving those who need passage through. The morning light catches the water in the chamber, turns it to gold and silver, creates patterns of light and shadow on the old brick walls. The balance beams rest in their positions, ready to swing when needed. The gates stand firm, ready to open and close, to contain and release, to do their work. The mechanisms wait, silent and still, until they are called upon to move, to function, to serve. And the lock keeper, keeper of all this, guardian of this passage, tends to his work with quiet dedication, with calm presence, with the deep satisfaction that comes from doing what one is meant to do, in the place one is meant to be, in the manner one is meant to do it. The canal flows on. The boats pass through. The sun climbs higher. And the Quiet Canal Lock continues its ancient work, connecting water to water, place to place, moment to moment, in the eternal rhythm of rise and fall, empty and full, open and closed, the simple, essential work of passage, performed with care, performed with patience, performed with peace. The morning settles into its rhythm. Boats continue to arrive at intervals, some from the north, needing to descend, others from the south, needing to ascend. The lock keeper moves between the tasks with practiced ease, never hurrying, never delaying, simply doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done. There is a meditative quality to the work, a repetitive pattern that allows the mind to rest while the body performs familiar movements. His hands know where to grasp the balance beams, his feet know where to step on the towpath, his eyes know what to look for in the water's movement, in the boat's position, in the state of the mechanisms. Between boats, there are periods of waiting. These are not empty times, not wasted moments, but essential parts of the day's rhythm. The lock keeper uses these intervals to check and maintain the lock's various components. He walks the length of the chamber, examining the brickwork for any signs of deterioration, any places where mortar might be crumbling, any cracks that might need attention. He checks the gates, running his hands over the timber, feeling for soft spots that might indicate rot, testing the iron straps to ensure they are secure. He oils the hinges and the paddle mechanisms, wiping away any dirt or debris, keeping everything moving smoothly. This maintenance is constant, ongoing, never finished. The lock is always subject to the forces of water and weather, always wearing, always requiring care. But this does not frustrate the lock keeper. Rather, it gives purpose to the quiet times, fills the spaces between boats with useful work. He finds satisfaction in keeping everything in good order, in catching small problems before they become large ones, in ensuring that the lock will continue to function reliably for years to come. His wife brings him lunch at midday, bread and cheese, an apple, more tea. They sit together on the bench for a few minutes, eating in comfortable silence, watching the canal, watching the clouds that have been building slowly in the west. The clouds are still high and white, unthreatening, but there are more of them now than there were this morning. Rain tomorrow, as he predicted. But today remains fair, the sun still shining, the air still warm and pleasant. How many boats so far? His wife asks. He thinks for a moment, counting in his head. 7 through, he says. 3 up, 4 down. Might be a few more this afternoon. She nods, finishing her apple, wrapping the core in a cloth to take back to the kitchen, where it will go into the compost heap in the garden. Nothing is wasted here. Everything has its use, its place in the cycle of the household, the garden, the life they have built together. I'm making soup for dinner, she says. The last of the potatoes from the root cellar, and carrots, and that ham bone we saved. Sounds good, he says, and means it. Her soups are excellent, rich and flavorful, exactly what is wanted on an evening that will likely be cooler than this afternoon has been. She rises, gathering the cloth and the empty mugs. I'll bring you tea later, she says, and returns to the cottage, her steps unhurried, her movements economical and practiced. She has her own work, her own rhythms, and they complement his, fitting together to create a household that functions smoothly, that provides for their needs, that gives them both satisfaction and purpose. The lock keeper finishes his lunch and resumes his watch. A boat is approaching from the north, A single narrowboat, painted in cheerful colors, red and blue and white, with flowers painted along the sides in the traditional style. The boat is moving slowly, more slowly than most boats travel, and as it draws closer, the lock keeper can see why. At the tiller stands a very elderly man, perhaps 80 years old or more, his face deeply lined, his hands gnarled with age but still steady on the tiller. He is alone on the boat, managing it by himself, and doing so with the ease of long experience. The lock keeper watches the old man approach with interest and respect. To be still traveling the canals at such an age, still managing a boat alone, speaks of a lifetime spent on the water, of deep knowledge and capability. The old man brings his boat to the lock approach and steps off with surprising agility, making his rope fast with movements that are slower than a young person's, but just as sure, just as effective. "Afternoon," the old man says, his voice gravelly but strong. "Afternoon," the lock keeper replies. "Going far?" "Just to the next village," the old man says. "Got a mooring there for the winter. Figure I'll settle in for a few months, wait out the cold." The lock keeper nods. Many of the canal travelers do this, travel during the warmer months and find a mooring for winter, when ice can make the canals dangerous or impassable. "Sensible," he says. "Weather's turning. Rain coming tomorrow, I'd say." "Aye," the old man agrees, looking at the sky with the same practiced eye. "I can feel it in my bones. Used to be I could travel year-round, but these days the cold gets to me more than it used to." The lock keeper begins the process of lowering the lock, opening the paddles, releasing the water. The old man returns to his boat and settles himself on the cabin roof with a sigh, pulling a pipe from his pocket and taking his time filling it with tobacco. He strikes a match and lights the pipe, puffing contentedly, sending small clouds of fragrant smoke into the air. The smell of the tobacco carries on the breeze, a good smell, rich and sweet. The boat descends slowly in the chamber, and the old man sits smoking, watching the walls rise around him, watching the light change as he sinks deeper into the lock. He has been through this lock before, many times before, perhaps hundreds of times over the decades he has traveled these canals. The lock keeper can see this in the way the old man sits so calmly, so completely at ease, trusting the process, trusting the lock, trusting the keeper. When the boat has descended and the lower gates are opened, the old man rises, stows his pipe, and moves to his tiller. The engine deepens its note, and the boat begins to move forward. As it passes through the gates, the old man raises his hand to the lock keeper. "You keep a good lock," he says. "Best on this stretch of canal." "Thank you," the lock keeper says, pleased by the compliment, knowing it comes from someone who truly knows, who has seen many locks, who understands what good maintenance looks like. "I'll be back through in the spring," the old man says, "heading north again when the weather warms." "I'll be here," the lock keeper says, and the old man smiles, nods, and steers his boat away down the canal. The lock keeper watches him go, watches the boat move steadily away, growing smaller in the distance. He feels a kinship with the old man, a connection based on shared understanding of this life, this place, these waters. They are different ages, have different roles. One a traveler, one a keeper, but they are both part of the canal, both part of its community, both participants in the slow, steady rhythm of life on the water. He resets the lock, and another boat comes, and then another. The afternoon progresses steadily, the sun moving across the sky, the light changing, growing warmer, more golden as the day ages. The clouds in the west grow more numerous, building higher, but they remain white, remain unthreatening. No rain today. Tomorrow, yes, but not today. The lock keeper's wife comes out mid-afternoon with tea and biscuits, and they share another brief rest on the bench. The cat has returned from its morning adventures and sits at their feet, grooming itself, perfectly content. A family of ducks swims past on the canal, the mother leading, for ducklings following in a neat line, small and fluffy, swimming with determination. The lock keeper and his wife watch the ducks pass, smiling at the sight, at the order of it, at the simple rightness of a mother duck leading her young. "They hatched late," his wife observes. "Most of the ducklings are nearly grown by now. Second brood, maybe," the lock keeper suggests. "Some ducks will nest twice in a good year." They watch the ducks disappear around a bend in the canal, heading toward wherever ducks go, following whatever instincts guide them. The lock keeper finishes his tea and returns to his work. His wife gathers the cups and returns to the cottage, to her own endless round of tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending, tending the garden. Their lives are separate in their details but unified in their purpose, in their shared commitment to this place, to each other, to the life they have chosen. More boats come. A family with children, the kids laughing and playing on the cabin roof, excited by the passage through the lock, asking the lockkeeper questions about how it works, about how deep the water is, about whether there are fish in the canal. He answers patiently, kindly, remembering being young himself, remembering being curious about how things worked, about the world and its mechanisms. A young couple on their first canal journey, nervous about handling their newly purchased boat, grateful for the lockkeeper's calm guidance, his reassurance that they are doing fine, that everyone is nervous at first, that experience will come with time. They pass through successfully and continue on their way, their confidence slightly increased, their anxiety slightly decreased. A commercial narrowboat, one of the few still carrying cargo on the canals, this one loaded with coal, riding low in the water, the boatman a professional who has worked these canals for 30 years, who nods to the lockkeeper in mutual respect, two professionals acknowledging each other's competence. Each boat is different, each passage is unique, but the lock performs the same service for all of them. It does not distinguish between rich and poor, between experienced and novice, between commercial and pleasure craft. The lock simply does what locks do. It lifts and lowers, it opens and closes, it enables passage. In this there is a kind of democracy, a fairness that the lockkeeper appreciates and upholds in his own work. The afternoon ages toward evening. The sun, which was high overhead at midday, begins its slow descent toward the western horizon. The light becomes more golden, more slanted, creating longer shadows, bringing out textures in the brick and timber that are less visible at midday. The water takes on a warmer color, reflecting the golden light, looking less like silver and more like honey. The intervals between boats begin to lengthen. The busy part of the day is passing. Most boats that were traveling today have either reached their destinations or found moorings for the night. There will be a few more passages, perhaps, but the main flow of traffic is done. The lockkeeper can feel this shift, can sense it in the quieting of the afternoon, in the way the canal feels less active, more peaceful. He takes advantage of a longer interval to do some work on the towpath, trimming back grass that has grown over the edge, clearing away a few branches that have fallen from the nearby trees. This is not strictly necessary work. The towpath is perfectly passable as it is, but he takes pride in keeping everything tidy, everything well maintained. The towpath is part of the lock, part of his responsibility, and he tends to it accordingly. As he works, he notices things he would not notice while tending boats. A bird's nest in one of the hedge bushes, empty now, the young birds long since fledged and gone. A patch of wildflowers growing near the water's edge, their small purple blooms delicate and pretty. A stone in the path that has worked loose, which he kicks back into place and tamps down with his boot. These small observations, these minor adjustments, are part of the ongoing relationship he has with this place, part of the constant attention that keeps everything in order. The sun sinks lower, approaching the horizon. The light becomes even more golden, more beautiful, painting everything with warm tones. The lockkeeper straightens from his work and looks out over the canal, over the landscape beyond. The fields are gold in this light, the trees are dark green edged with gold, the sky is layering itself with colors, blue above, shading to gold and pink and orange near the horizon where the sun is setting. One more boat appears, approaching from the south. It is a small boat, a single person aboard, moving slowly, in no apparent hurry. The lockkeeper prepares to receive it, opening the lower gates, waiting as the boat enters the chamber. The person aboard is a woman middle-aged, with gray hair and a peaceful expression. She secures her rope and then simply sits, hands folded in her lap, watching the water rise with a kind of meditative calm. The lockkeeper recognizes this quality, has seen it in many people who travel the canals for long periods. There is something about the water, about the slow pace, about the rhythm of traveling through locks and along quiet stretches, that induces a kind of peace, a letting go of the urgency and stress that characterizes much of modern life. The canals offer an alternative, a different way of being, and those who embrace it often develop this quality of calm presence. The boat rises slowly in the chamber. Neither the lockkeeper nor the woman speaks. There is no need for words, no need for conversation. The moment is complete without them, perfect in its simplicity. The water rises, the boat rises, and both the woman and the lockkeeper simply are present, simply witness this process, simply exist in this moment. When the boat has risen to the level of the upper pound, the lockkeeper opens the gates. The woman starts her engine, steers her boat carefully out of the chamber, and raises one hand to the lockkeeper in silent thanks. He returns the gesture, and the boat moves away, disappearing gradually around a bend in the canal, heading toward whatever mooring the woman has chosen for the night. The lock-keeper resets the lock one more time, then walks back to the cottage. The sun is touching the horizon now, beginning to set. The sky is brilliant with color, oranges and pinks and purples layering across the western sky, reflected in the canal's surface, doubling the beauty, multiplying the light. It is the most beautiful time of day, this transition from afternoon to evening, this slow dimming of the light, this gentle movement toward night. His wife is in the kitchen, and the smell of soup fills the cottage, rich and savory, exactly as promised. The table is set for two, bread sliced, butter waiting. The fire burns warm in the hearth, pushing back the evening chill. The lock-keeper washes his hands at the pump outside, dries them on a towel, and enters the cottage, closing the door behind him. They eat their dinner together, talking quietly about the day, the boats that came through, the old man heading to his winter mooring, the late hatching ducklings, the weather coming tomorrow. They talk about small things, everyday things, the details that make up a life. There is comfort in these conversations, in this sharing of the day's observations, in this companionship. After dinner, the lock-keeper goes back outside to light the lanterns. The sun has set now, and dusk is gathering, though there is still light in the sky, a deep blue overhead, fading to pale green and gold at the western horizon where the sun has disappeared. He lights each lantern in turn, moving along the towpath, striking matches, watching flames catch and steady behind glass. The lanterns glow softly in the gathering darkness, marking the lock, making it visible, making it safe for any late boats that might still arrive. When all the lanterns are lit, he stands for a moment looking out over the lock, over the canal, over the evening that is settling around him. The water is very still, reflecting what little light remains in the sky. The lantern flames burn steady, their reflections perfect on the water's surface. Everything is quiet, peaceful, ready for the night. He returns to the cottage, to the warmth, to his wife, to the comfortable evening that awaits. They will sit by the fire for a while, perhaps reading, perhaps simply resting, letting the day's work settle, letting their bodies relax, preparing for sleep. Later they will go to bed, will lie down in the darkness, will sleep through the night while the lock stands ready outside, while the lanterns burn, while the water lies still. Tomorrow will bring rain, as predicted, and there will be fewer boats, but the work will continue. The lock will need tending regardless of weather, regardless of how many boats come or don't come. This is the constancy of the work, the reliability of it. The lock-keeper will be here, as he has always been, as he will continue to be, doing his work, fulfilling his purpose, serving those who need passage through. But that is tomorrow. For now, there is this evening, this fire, this warmth, this companionship. For now, there is rest after a day of good work well done. For now, there is peace. The lock stands outside in the gathering darkness, its lanterns glowing softly, its gates closed, its chamber full and ready. The water lies still, reflecting the deepening blue of the evening sky. The towpath stretches away into shadow, empty now, quiet now, waiting for morning. And slowly, gently, night returns to the canal, wrapping it in darkness, holding it in stillness, allowing it to rest until dawn comes again and the cycle begins anew. The lock-keeper sits by his fire, warm and content. The lock waits in the darkness, patient and still. The canal flows on, eternal and unchanging. And all is well. All is peaceful. All is as it should be. The quiet canal lock at dusk, settling now into night, completing the cycle, finishing the day, preparing for rest. The lanterns burn steadily, their light soft and golden, creating small pools of illumination in the darkness. The flames behind the glass move slightly, stirred by drafts too subtle to feel, creating gentle variations in the light, in the shadows, in the reflections on the water. This movement is hypnotic, soothing, the kind of thing one could watch for hours without tiring of it, finding in the dancing flames a kind of peace, a kind of meditation. The cottage windows glow warm in the darkness, light spilling out onto the grass, creating rectangles of gold against the night. Inside, the lock-keeper and his wife sit together, the fire crackling softly, the cat curled on the hearth, everything peaceful, everything right. This is their life, and it is a good life, a life of purpose and meaning, a life lived in harmony with the rhythms of the canal, the rhythms of the seasons, the rhythms of work and rest. Outside, the night deepens. Stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, first one, then several, then too many to count. The water of the canal reflects these stars, holds them on its surface, creates a mirror image of the heavens. The lock sits at the center of all this, The stars above, the stars below, the darkness all around, the lanterns glowing softly, marking this place, making it known, making it present in the vastness of the night. A boat might still come, even this late. It is not common, but it happens. Travelers who have been delayed, who are pushing on to reach a particular destination, who need passage through even in the darkness. The lock-keeper would hear them coming, would hear their engine long before they arrived. He would rise from his chair by the fire, would put on his coat and boots, would go out into the night to help them through. This is his duty, his calling, and he would fulfill it willingly, without complaint, any hour of the day or night. But no boat comes. The canal lies quiet, empty of traffic, given over to the night. The water lies still. The lanterns burn. The stars will slowly overhead. And the quiet canal lock rests in the darkness, its work done for the day, its purpose fulfilled, its presence constant and unchanging in the flow of time. In the cottage, the fire burns down to embers. The lock-keeper and his wife rise, check the door, bank the fire for the night, and make their way to bed. The cat follows them, settling at the foot of the bed, purring softly. They lie down in the darkness, their breathing slowing, their bodies relaxing into sleep. Outside, the lanterns continue to burn, faithful guardians of the lock, burning through the night, ready to guide any late traveler who might need passage. Their light reflects on the water, doubles itself, creates a constellation of golden points in the darkness. The canal holds these reflections tenderly, carefully, as it holds everything: the boats that travel its length, the fish that swim in its depths, the birds that nest along its banks, the lock that enables passage through. The night is complete now, full and dark, wrapped in silence and stillness. The lock waits, as it has waited countless nights before, as it will wait countless nights to come. Patient, constant, reliable, ready. And in this waiting, in this stillness, in this quiet patience, there is something deeply peaceful, something that speaks to the soul, that quiets the mind, that allows rest to come naturally, gently, like water rising in the lock chamber, like night falling over the canal, like sleep settling over the world. All is quiet now. All is still. All is at peace. The quiet canal lock at night, resting, waiting, being. Simply being. In stillness. In darkness. In peace.